Halftime show. Terry Ford, glad you could be hanging as we roll till 3. We're letting Tyler get out of here, go home, take some time off. He can watch the Masters, lay around on the couch. Ed Bird is here, though, to punch the buttons to keep us on the air and keep us from saying terrible things that the FCC will fine us over as we roll till 3 here on the Halftime Show. Got some sound from South Carolina football players. We're going to get to a bunch of it during the show. Also hear from Mark Kingston from Carolina Calls last night. We got a ton of all that to get into as, spring practice continues on. We'll have the spring game doing our broadcast with Chris Miller from Learfield doing play-by-play, myself, Wes Mitchell, Chris Clark from Gamecock Central, all will do the broadcast together. That's a week from this Saturday, the spring game. You can hear it right here in Columbia on 107.5 The Game. If you are hanging out with us also in Florence and Myrtle Beach, we do appreciate you very much. All right, as we look at spring practice and some of the stuff we've heard, whether from Shane Beamer, some of the other coaches, hearing some of this from the players yesterday, one of the things you're seeing, especially on the defensive, I shouldn't say especially, but on the defensive side of the ball, the speed at linebacker, the athleticism at linebacker seems to be upgraded. Also the depth, obviously, but speed and athleticism. Demetrius Knight, obviously, a guy brought in at running 22 miles an hour, roughly, or almost 22 miles an hour. Bam Martin Scott, talking about he's running about 22 miles an hour, faster than my car. It's kind of embarrassing. You've got more speed and athleticism, and not to say that's the end-all, be-all, but you want guys that can go sideline to sideline, guys that can make havoc plays behind the line of scrimmage, and sometimes speed and athleticism helps out in those regards. Not to say, again, that's going to be the only thing that does it, but it helps out the more athletic and faster you can play on defense. Sometimes you can make some plays that if you're not as athletic or fast as that guy, you might be a step off of that play, and it could make the difference of a tackle for a 2-yard gain or a tackle downfield by a DB for a 22-yard gain. So it is good to know, looking at the guys that have come in, you're seeing more speed, athleticism, and on offense. You got a lot of receivers who can do, they're not tall guys, of course, not tall, rangy dudes, but you've got, shorter, quicker guys who are better in space, guys who can make catches and knock off yards after the catch. So they do have some quickness and speed, and they bring something to the table that you had a little. Look, Xavier Legette could make a catch and go do some damage after the catch. Brown as well could, get himself in space, make a couple guys miss, pick up some yards after catch. But this team has multiple guys who can do those type of things in the wide receiver room. So, look, speed, quickness, athleticism, obviously you got to be able to play the game well, but it doesn't hurt to have a lot of guys who are twitchy. So we're going to hear from some of the football players, Demetrius Knight, also Oscar Attaway, Jalen Kilgore. David Spalding, we're going to hear a little bit from him as well. And that's a guy that, to me, it would be great if David Spalding could stay healthy. It would, because it gives you another option in covering slot receivers. And look, Jalen Kilgore could be better at it this year than he was last year. He was a freshman last year and never, ever played the nickel. Maybe he can improve. Clayton White tried, DQ Smith there, tried Nick Amenwari there, then went to Kilgore. It was a mixed bag. There was some issues. Finally changed up some coverages in the back end of the defense the final month of the year, and that seemed to help. But could David Spalding also be on the field for reps covering the slot to help you out? I don't know, but we'll hear from David Spalding, also some of his sound from yesterday as well. As we continue to go through spring practice, a lot of question marks. The spring game will be interesting this year. Again, it's not going to tell you everything in the world, but it'll be fun to see some of these guys, the newcomers, and see how some of the guys who were on the roster last year, at least at this point of the offseason, how have they developed? Again, there's a long way to go still, but it'll just give us a little glimpse. We got a little something there, of what's going on in the spring game. Also, Mark Kingston on Carolina Calls last night. We'll play a bunch of cuts from Mark. And, going to Florida. Gators this year, around 500 in the league, like the Gamecocks. Obviously Florida has Jack Castellone, who is looked at. I mean, no one's doing, two ways the way Castellone is. It's almost like the Shohei Ohtani of college baseball. Old Jack hits for power, throws really hard, really far and away the best Florida Gator pitcher. And he's got, 17 home runs. So that's a guy to deal with. But Florida's pitching, once you get away from Jack, it's a struggle. They've had some struggles pitching this year. Hopefully South Carolina can take advantage of this weekend in Gainesville and, produce some runs against the Florida pitching staff that, they're near the bottom of the SEC in many categories. So we'll see how that goes. And, Tyler brought this up yesterday, this 9-game run that South Carolina is going to be on when they play Florida, they play Kentucky, they play Arkansas. You're getting a team, and of course it's not all the same players, but you're taking on a team that was in the finals last year in Omaha, finished runner-up. Then you get the surprise team in the SEC, Kentucky, and you get possibly the best team in the SEC in Arkansas. So this 9-game run is going to be something. And, you just don't want to go 2-7 or 3-6. If at least you can stay in that 4-5, 5-4 range on this 9-game run, that still puts you in a good position moving forward. South Carolina's got a top 20 RPI. That win over North Carolina helps your RPI. So, yes, it's very inconsistent this year so far for the Gamecocks. Like a 3-game sweep over Vandy, you're like, wow. But then, you have your issues at home against A&M, just like Vandy at that time, the number 3 team in the country. Everything's been inconsistent. The offense, the starting pitching, the bullpen. I mean, some have been better than others, but, there's a lack of consistency all over the place. Look, I get it. It's peaks and valleys in baseball. It's a long season. But you want obviously more peaks and valleys. And right now we're seeing peak valley, peak valley, peak valley, especially in the SEC season. So we'll see where it ends up going. But right now, South Carolina's in a pretty good spot. Recently they were ranked. You can post and grind out some W's, you get back in the top 25, at least the top 25 conversation. You feel like you're sitting in a pretty good spot for the postseason right now. You'd love to host before it's over with. That's obviously not a guarantee at this point, but we'll see where it ends up. I mean, look at LSU, won the national title last year. They've cratered it in SEC play. It's a tough league. You know it. I don't tell you anything you don't know. Tough to win in the SEC, especially when you go on the road. So we'll see what South Carolina can do in Gainesville against a Florida team that has been 500 as well through the SEC season, a team that, their pitching has really struggled. Excellent defensive team are the Gators. But it is a pitching staff hopefully you can do some damage against. And, of course, we get that going, I believe, 6:45 tomorrow night, and we'll have Friday, Saturday, Sunday games here on the Game in Columbia and also in Myrtle Beach. So that 3-game set getting started tomorrow night. Again, I believe 6:15, 6:15 pregame, Saturday 3:45 pregame, Sunday 11:45 pregame, and, of course, 15 minutes after the pregame, first pitch. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, South Carolina and Florida starting tomorrow night. All right, we'll get back in here, check out some sound. We'll start with some Carolina football players. We'll zoom in on Demetrius Knight, the transfer portal linebacker. Again, brings speed and athleticism and productivity to the table from his time at Central Florida. So Demetrius Knight, we'll hear from him coming up next. Thoughts on his speed, on playing multiple spots on defense, and talking about the freshman linebackers. Terry Ford, Ed Bird's here. Hope he has those Werther candies I like. You got those? Good deal. I could eat like 100 of those things. They're addictive. I'm going to have to go to rehab to get out of this funk I'm in with those candies. Ed Bird's here. We're going to run some Demetrius Knight sound next. It's a halftime show. Terry Ford, glad you could be hanging with us here on the Game. Halftime show, Terry Ford here on the game. Like I said, we were going to look at or hear a lot of sound from Gamecock players. We'll start with Demetrius Knight. Came in from Charlotte. I think I said Central Florida in the last segment. I think I have brain fog, Ed Bird. I've got to go see Dr. Dan. Demetrius Knight coming in from Charlotte. Of course, Knight started his career at Georgia Tech. Really got a chance to shine at Charlotte last year. If you look at Pro Football Focus grades, not the end-all, be-all, but just kind of gives us a little look into a player's season. Knight was the highest-rated defender for the Knights. Really good in coverage, high coverage grade, almost 92 coverage grade. Didn't rush the passer a ton, but has a good pass rush grade in the mid-70s. Tackling, good in the 70s. Run defense was, those grades were a little below average. Overall, though, the highest graded defender on the Charlotte defense last season, especially, like I said, good when it comes to coverage, tackling. Didn't rush the passer a lot, but good pass rush numbers. Only had like a sack. ESPN had a sack and a half. Pro Football Focus has a sack, 7 total pressures, a couple of hits, and 4 hurries on the quarterback. So that's Demetrius Knight. Let's hear from old Demetrius talking to the media yesterday. First of all, let's go cut 9, Ed Bird. Demetrius Knight on playing multiple spots on defense.
It's been extremely fun. Not only does that help my game here, but it helps my game in the long run. So, when you get that chance to play in the NFL, I believe versatility is a big key. Can you play Will? Can you play Mike? Or can you play on the line for a couple of snaps and set the edge? So stuff like that. It's been pretty fun just to mix it up with Coach White and Debo and play with different guys instead of playing with the same guys all the time, just to see what guys play better together or see how guys communicate and things like that. So it's been pretty fun. It's better than my game and has helped my IQ to continue to develop.
And, again, for Knight, moving around the defense, playing multiple linebacker spots, because we'll see where it ends up with Demetrius Knight, but he's going to be in the mix. He's going to get snaps. And this linebacker crew, more depth than we've seen the last 2 years, there's no doubt. With the transfer portal guys coming in, you got some freshmen, some returnees. Obviously, Debo Williams is going to be starting. What does Mo Kaba bring you? At what point does Mo Kaba be able to even get on the field? But he's coming back from another knee injury, and we'll see where that goes. So the depth in the linebacker room, much deeper than we've seen. You've got Wendell Gregory and Fred Johnson, the freshmen coming in. Like I said, you got transfer portal guys coming in as well to go with who's already returning. Feels like it's a room. It's more athletic, and the depth chart looks much better. Speaking of athletic, let's get to this, Ed Bird. Demetrius Knight cut 10, talking about his speed.
I have this spring, or I guess winter workouts when we were, I was clocked at a 21.8. So, but Bam got me with the 22, a little bit faster than me, but we're 245 pounds and can still run 21.8, 21.9. You're pretty fast, but I was that's as fast as I've been. I'm still scratching at the door for that 22, but I'll hit that one day.
Yeah, only 21.8, Ed. That's all. I can do 0.8. I might be able to do 0.8. I think Demetrius Knight could run backwards faster than I could run forward at this point in my life. But almost hitting 22 miles an hour. Like he brought up Bam Martin-Scott hitting 22 miles an hour. Just, you have this athleticism and speed and quickness. Like I said, look, if you can't play the position, all the speed in the world doesn't matter, right? But if you have the skills to play the position and you are playing it also from the neck up in football IQ to go with your skills of playing the position physically, the speed is only an extra added deal. Because like I said, at times, linebackers for the Gamecocks, they make tackles, but they make tackles 5 yards downfield or 6 yards downfield, 4 yards downfield. They weren't making a lot of plays at the line of scrimmage at times or behind the line of scrimmage, which we call tackles for loss, havoc plays, whatever. Just wasn't happening consistently from the linebacking core. Feels like this year you have a better chance to get more of those plays. from a deeper crew who has more speed and athleticism. And we're going to hear some Bam Martin Scott in a little bit. But once South Carolina went to that 3.35, Bam Martin Scott all of a sudden is like, wow, look at this dude. Where'd this dude come from? So we'll get more into that. Spinning back, though, to Demetrius Knight. Demetrius also talks about the freshman linebackers, Gregory and Johnson. That would be cut 11. Ed Bird fired up for us.
I see nothing but dog mentality, nothing but, they come to meeting rooms like a sponge, and that's how you should be as a freshman, wanting to absorb everything you can from not just Coach White and Coach Money, but all the linebackers in the room. So they'll ask questions. My locker is right across from both of them, so they'll both ask me questions after meetings on the field about how to play this, what am I thinking on certain plays when I make plays, and things like that. So they've really been students of the game, which is, as a freshman, that's what you want to be, especially if you want to touch the field. And I believe they will be able to have the ability to do that come this fall.
And we'll see. I mean, like I said, it's a crowded room with, Johnson and Gregory, the two freshmen. We're hearing from Demetrius Knight. Don't forget about Bengali Kamara, the transfer from Pitt, coming in as well at linebacker. And then you've got, Debo Williams, who's, feels like will be the starter at the linebacker spot, whether you're going 4-2-5, 3-3-5, whatever the case. So, again, a lot of guys who you have a lot of hope for can improve the performance of the linebacker position at South Carolina. Okay, this just in. Scott Drew, head basketball coach at Baylor, being wooed by Kentucky to take over as the head coach in Lexington after John Calipari rolled out. Scott Drew has decided to stay at Baylor. Not a surprise from this guy. I get it, one of the, wealthy boosters at Kentucky flew Scott Drew's family to Lexington and said, hey, look at it here. We got horses. Hey, kids, we got bourbon. I get it. And, again, it's Kentucky, but I'm not surprised. Look, Scott Drew, what he's done at Baylor over 21 years, that's his program. It's never been anywhere near anything to what Scott Drew made Baylor. Dave Bliss had a little bit of success, but nothing like what Scott Drew has done at Baylor. It's truly his program. They will put a statue of Scott Drew outside the arena. Not only did Scott Drew win a national championship, he's been to the Elite Eight a couple times, Sweet 16 a few times. But look what Scott Drew did when they said, hey, here's the mess that Dave Bliss left. You clean it up. Not just the NCAA, but from federal authorities and local authorities. And just, if you've never, there's a great documentary on it. I can't think of the name of it right now, but I watched this documentary on that whole mess at Baylor with the basketball team and one teammate killing another and the cover up. It's just it's craziness. Scott Drew took that and made Baylor one of the top 15 programs in America. Yeah, the last 3 years, they haven't gotten out of the second round of the NCAA tournament. 4 years ago, they won a national championship. So the combination of the national championship, multiple trips to the Elite Eight and Sweet 16, what you did to take that dumpster fire and make it a top 15 program, Scott Drew is gold at Baylor. My guess is you're going to hear about a contract extension for Scott Drew in the next 24 to 48 hours at Baylor. But to me, if you're Scott Drew, why would you go to Kentucky and deal with that hornet's nest of crazy? Why would you? You got it great at Baylor. Nobody's putting pressure on you. You've been knocked out in the round of 32 3 straight years. No one's screaming for your job. One of the reasons John Calipari is no longer the head coach of Kentucky, Wildcats have won one NCAA tournament game since 2019. And, of course, Cal made the mistake of being really successful his first 6 years, 4 Final Fours in his first 6 years and a national championship. So what's happened here in the last 4 seasons, this is not acceptable, period. But then when you saw what Cal had it at and you see where it's at now. But those folks, they're not going to take 3 straight second-round dumps very well. And think about Scott Drew at Baylor. They love him there. They truly love him. There is a connection with that fan base and community to Scott Drew in Waco. This is not to be mean. This is just the truth. At Kentucky, you know what their emotional connection is to? Wins. cutting down nets, going to Final Fours, winning national championships, dominating the SEC. They don't care who's in that coach's office. They'll love you if you're winning. They tolerated Calipari because he was winning. If you're winning, they love you, or at least like you, or don't hate you. But you start underachieving, you got no love. They want winning. That's all they care about. But they're not going to be all giddy and loving over the head coach like they are at Baylor for Scott Drew. So Scott Drew has turned down the interest from Kentucky. He'll stay at Baylor, and my guess is a nice contract extension will be following for Scott Drew here very soon, and Kentucky will continue their search. Bruce Pearl's name has come up. Jay and I were talking about Pearl yesterday before he jumped on to do the postgame show. I could see Pearl taking that gig. And it's nothing against Auburn. I can see Bruce Pearl wanting to try to wrestle that animal. I do. Because that, not like Calipari, Bruce Pearl, he's been to the Final Four at Auburn. He was successful at Tennessee. Bruce Pearl he's done good work in multiple stops. And, to get a blue blood gig when he's never had a blue blood gig, that might mean something to Bruce Pearl to show everybody he can do it on the highest of level at a program with the highest of expectation. He might go for it. Calipari, remember, John Calipari got to the Final Four at UMass, took off, went to Memphis. UMass then went on probation. Calipari got to the final, really was this close to winning a national championship at Memphis. Derrick Rose makes free throws. Memphis wins a national championship. So Calipari had gotten mid-majors and lower mid-majors to the Final Four, but he wasn't in the club. He wasn't in the big boy coaches club, and it ate at Calipari because he knew he was just as good as those guys. But he was looked at different. Then he got in the door by going to Kentucky. All of a sudden, he's got a seat at the table. He's leaving the kids' table of coaching. Now he's at the main table. That's something Calipari wanted desperately. And to prove he could win at Kentucky, which Calipari the first 6 years did, to his credit. Bruce Pearl might feel the same way of, look, let me into Lexington. I'll win big in Lexington. And I won't screw it up like Cal did. I'll keep winning. So Bruce Pearl might end up being the guy before it's all said and done. His name's kind of floated out there as the second level of candidates after the Scott Drews and the Billy Donovans and the Nate Oateses and the Hurleys. We'll see. But right now, if you're a Kentucky fan, you're going, well, why didn't anybody want our job? It's easy. They got it pretty good where they're at, and two, they don't want to deal with all that mess in Lexington. Simple. All right, we talked about it. Baseball this weekend. Also, the big parade for the women downtown starting on Main Street, 2 o'clock on Sunday. Get on out there. Weather should be fantastic. So enjoy the celebration for the Gamecock women and also Dawn Staley and her staff. Another parade for another national championship. That'll be 2 o'clock on Sunday. I will get back in here. Let's hear from Mark Kingston, the head coach of the South Carolina Gamecock baseball squad. Up next, we're going to hear Mark Kingston discussing something very interesting about Fridays. That's coming up next. Halftime show. Terry Ford, Ed Birds here. We roll till 3 on the game. It's a halftime show. Terry Ford, Ed Bird, Tyler's going to make it a little short day. We won't make him do the double today. So Tyler's heading on home. Ed Bird's here to hang out with us as we cook till 3 here on The Game in Columbia, Florence, and Myrtle Beach. Thanks for hanging out with us. We appreciate you. 803-404-6100 is our phone number and text number as well. Firehouse Subtext. The hour will be coming up here in a little bit. Let's get the Mark Kingston cuts, though, Ed Bird. Coach was on Carolina Calls last night with Derek Scott. A bunch of different things to talk about. We'll start with, look, South Carolina, especially in SEC play, has struggled on Fridays. Tyler did a nice deep dive earlier on the extra point. The top of the order has really scuffled. Again, sure, you're facing good pitching on a Friday night in the SEC. I get it. But still, the top of your order is also your best hitters. So your best hitters have to start winning more battles against the best pitchers. Here's Mark Kingston, his thoughts on playing better on Fridays.
Play better baseball. I mean, at the end of the day, you've got to play better baseball than the team you're playing. And we just have had some close games on Fridays that didn't go our way. So we just need to play better baseball, whether that means a little bit better defense, whether it means Eli really has a great outing, whether it means we get some more clutch hits. It could be any of those things. But we do need to continue to try to look for ways to make sure that we get the weekend off on a better foot.
It's just different things, right? I mean, like we said about the inconsistencies of this team, whether it's, you're not getting the big hit with runners in scoring position, or you fall behind early, or your starting pitching isn't as good as it's been in the past on a Friday, or defensively, you misplay something that leads to, a big inning for the opposition or run or unearned runs. It's not just one thing to point at. You can go through these Friday nights and say, okay, this happened, this could be better, that could be better. That was good last Friday, wasn't as good this Friday. It's just this team in itself has been so inconsistent to where you look at it and go, with all these inconsistencies, to be sitting where they're at right now is, I guess, is a good thing. Because we've seen multiple guys in the rotation, besides the back end of the bullpen, multiple pitchers in multiple roles. Offensively, there's been the struggles with runners in scoring position, which we're going to hear from Coach Kingston in a second about, and to try to get some consistency within the batting order, especially the lower part of the order. So there's been a lot of stuff going on here. Let's get to Coach Kingston there, Ed Bird. Cut to scouting the Florida Gators, who obviously are going to start a 3-game set tomorrow night.
Obviously, with them, it starts with Caglione, both from the pitching standpoint and the offensive side. He's a dominant performer in both areas, and so you've got to be very cognizant of him and what he can do to beat you. So it starts with that. They're an elite defensive team, as they generally are, and it's Florida. Again, they're going to have a very competitive mindset. They always have, they always will, and you've got to respect their ability to win games. They've struggled some in the midweeks, but they've also had some really good weekends. So we respect that. We respect the program and respect going down into their ballpark, because in this league, that's always a challenge.
It does start with Caglione. This year, if you want numbers, they're disgusting. They're so good. Caglione's hitting .397, slugging .802. His on base is .484. His OPS, which is slugging and on base together, is almost .1,300. He's walked more than he struck out. So think about that for a minute. Here's a guy slugging over 800, has 17 bombs on the year and 131 at-bats. That's a home run less than every 10 at-bats. He's hitting .400. And he's walked more than he struck out in this day and age. It's pretty good stuff. Really is. And then, Caglione on the mound, Florida, a team that has really struggled pitching-wise. Caglione is the only hurler on this team with an ERA under 4. 3.67. His whip's a little bit high. Old Jack walks some hitters. He's walked more hitters than hitters have gotten base hits off of Caglione. So his whip, which is walks and hits per inning, if you don't keep up with this stuff, 1.37. Caglione, in 34 and a third innings, has struck out 44. Like I said, walked 25. So he has walked a bunch, only given up 22 hits. So he'll put some guys on base. Absolutely. But he also will strike some guys out. And out of his 22 hits, 8 of them for extra bases. So almost half the hits he's given up. He haven't given up a ton in 34 and a third. Half of them have almost half been for extra bases. So Caglianone's a thing, whether he's taking the ball on Friday night or he's in the middle of the order all weekend long. Caglianone will be a factor. But if you look at the rest of the pitching for Florida, nobody's going to scare you if you look at numbers. They're really having issues. They've used a bunch of different guys starting games. Let's see. They have Caglianone, all 7 of his appearances are starts. Liam Peterson, who's had a rough go this year, ERA of almost 8 and a whip of almost 1.6. Peterson has made 8 starts. Besides that, though, it's a very mixed bag. 6 starts for Cade Fisher, hasn't been very good. You have Jameson and Neely and Slater and McNeely and also Philippot. All those guys have gotten starts. A ton of different pitchers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different starting pitchers this year for Florida. They're having a real tough time finding consistency with any pitching. Their team ERA is sitting at 6.33 right now, which if you look at the SEC standings, the only team that's worse than Florida is called nobody. The worst team ERA in the SEC, Florida Gators. So they've had their issues, and they've given up a ton of hits. No team has given up more, only one team has given up more hits than the Florida Gators. That's Missouri. So this is a pitching staff you can get. And South Carolina, they're very patient. They know the strike zone. If they can just, when they're ahead in the count and they get their pitch to Hunt, this is a pitching staff you can do damage on. So that's a little bit on the Florida Gators. We'll talk more about Florida as we move forward. All right, here's Mark Kingston. One of the things with South Carolina has been obviously hitting with runners in scoring position. It's been a thing all year. Here's Mark discussing how does the team improve regarding hitting with runners in scoring position.
It just changes by guys being able to relax in those moments. The guys that right now are struggling statistically in those areas have historically been very good. And we talk with, you can start with our 2 big guys there that get us all going. We know who those are. Last year they were tremendous with runners in scoring position. This year it hasn't quite been the same. And so baseball's funny like that. Sometimes you can get in a rut and it takes a little longer to get out, and they're obviously working very hard to be the players and to be the run producers that we all know they are. And sometimes it just takes one good at bat and they start to feel better, and then it gets contagious. But I do know we do need to do a better job of putting the ball in play with 2 strikes. I know we need to probably be a little bit more aggressive so that we don't get into bad counts with runners in scoring position. I think some guys are a little bit too aggressive in those situations, some guys not aggressive enough, and it's always a case-by-case basis. But yeah, we're well aware that we need to do a better job there, because as I look at some of the stats of other teams that we're playing, if we were just even close to our batting average normally as what we need to be with runners in scoring position, and we might have 3-4 more wins easily. And so it's the difference between being really good and being elite. And it's something that, as you mentioned, we can't talk about it too much, because then the thing becomes a bigger thing. But we just need to keep working every day until it turns.
Yeah, and that's the thing. The last situation you want on your hands, it's in dudes' heads. That's the last thing you want. Is all of a sudden they're sitting in the on-deck circle, runners on second and third. The guy in front of them strikes out with runners on second and third. Now it's second and third and 2 outs, and now you're strolling to the plate. And now you got to get a big knock. Let's say you've been scuffling with runners in scoring position. Yeah, it's a dumb thing about stuff being contagious in sports, but it is. A lot of times when your offense is cooking in baseball, it's contagious through the batting order. Everybody's fighting to get a bat to go to home plate. If the bullpen's rolling or the starting pitching is really good, it just kind of gets contagious. But scuffling gets contagious too, like a disease. And the last thing you want is a whole team full of dudes who nobody wants to go hit with runners in scoring position because nobody's got any confidence anymore, and it's in their head. All right, so again, 6:45. Or I keep saying 6:45. 6:15 tomorrow night. Our pregame coverage with Derek getting it started, along with Stewart. 6:30 first pitch. in Gainesville, South Carolina, and Florida. Gators right now on a 4-game losing streak after being swept at Missouri and also losing in Tallahassee, getting run ruled. So that's coming up tomorrow night, 6:15 pregame, 6:30 first pitch, Saturday 3:45, Sunday 11:45. All 3 games you can hear here in Columbia and in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and Florida. We'll come back in here. We'll continue hearing some sound. Florida Gator football. Florida Gator. I'm losing my mind today, Ed Bird. South Carolina Gamecock football players. We'll hear from Oscar Attaway, the new running back, next on the halftime show on the game. Halftime show with Terry Ford, Ed Bird. We'll get your Firehouse Sub Taxi Hour coming up here soon at 803-404-6100. Or you can hit us up on the text line or the phone line, same number, 803-404-6100. All right, we've been checking out some sound from Gamecock football players in the first hour of the show as spring practice continues on. We're going to slip over to the offensive side of the ball. Oscar Attaway, who is getting a lot of runs since Rocket Sanders is not participating in the spring. Attaway last year, I mean, the numbers are nice when it comes to just basically running the football. Attaway averaged 6 yards a carry, 123 runs, 738 yards. Like I said, 6 yards a pop, scored 6 touchdowns. It's interesting. Only a long gain of, that can't be right. Yeah, there it is. Long gain of 77 yards. And if you look at the deeper dive stats in Pro Football Focus for Attaway, fifth best overall offensive grade on the team. Split carries, he was like 1B when it comes to running backs. But, broke tackles, 28 broke tackles, 4.16 yards after contact. Basically, Oscar can run the football. Now, catching, it's a work in progress. Is blocking, whether pass protection or run blocking, a work in progress. But Oscar Attaway can flat out run the football. And here's Attaway talking yesterday. First of all, let's go with cut 12, Ed Bird. Attaway on splitting reps without Rocket Sanders around the spring. Cut 12.
It's been very good for us. It's a blessing in disguise because those guys have already had SEC reps, played in big SEC football games, and me and Jawan haven't. So with them being down, we get a lot of reps against a good defense against Coach White and trying to see what we can do better and what are we doing that's not good enough for us.
Again, no Rocket Sanders. There's more, there's more reps for everybody else. And Attaway will be, again, if Rocket Sanders is healthy, he's your starter, but Attaway's going to get run in games. He'll get snaps, he'll get carries. Maybe not as many as he did last year at North Texas, but he's going to get the ball if he's 1B. Now, again, Rocket Sanders, the hope is Rocket Sanders will be 100% ready to rock and roll when it matters. But if Sanders isn't, a guy like Attaway, he can bring you something. Might not be a 20 carry a game guy, but he can give you about 12 carries, 12 to 15 carries a game if need be. So Oscar Attaway getting more reps in the spring with no Rocket Sanders. All right, here we go. Also, Oscar Attaway cut 13, Ed Bird, adjusting to a new offensive system than the one he ran at North Texas.
I adjusted pretty well to it. Like a lot of coaches understand that I know how to catch football. Some running backs don't know how to do that very well. And so coach tries to get me out there instead of running a 3-yard route, run a 5-yard route. 2 yards is a big difference in the SEC. You can win or lose a game off of 1 yard, 1 inch. And so, adjusting to all of that has been pretty fun, actually, coming into a new scheme because we're getting coached from, what's my guy name from Georgia State? I forgot my coach's name. I'm sorry. Coach Elliott. Getting Coach Elliott out there, getting his run scheme that he brought over from Georgia State is even better. So, just learning a lot of different other things and trying to adjust to it as well as I can.
You ever done that? You blank on someone's name? Random, you're going to use it, right? Then you go, and then there's my guy. He's my guy. He's my guy is who he is. He's my guy. But Attaway, it's a different run game scheme than what he saw at North Texas. And, Attaway only caught 14 balls last year. He's only caught 21 in his career. So he hasn't been asked to really be used a whole lot in the pass game. And he might be asked a little bit more of that at South Carolina. So that's an adjustment. Plus the fact that you are, using a different run game scheme. So there's Oscar Attaway talking to the media yesterday. All right, real quick. So we might talk about this at some point in the show. Yes, I've seen it. O.J. Simpson passed away at the age of 76. Maybe we'll get into it a little bit later. What do I say? What do you say? It's almost like a tale of two lives, right? The guy that we saw for a long time, Hall of Fame running back, broadcaster, looked like this cool dude you love to have beers with. He was played up as a hero, all those things. And then the guy who allegedly killed his ex-wife and Ronald Goldman. And then the guy that did the TV special, I didn't do it, but here's how I would do it if I did do it. What the hell was that? I mean, and then you've got the guy that we saw after the Nicole Simpson and Ronald Goldman murders. You saw a tale of two totally different people. And, now O.J. Simpson passed away at age 76. Not a lot of wet eyes in the world. Is that fair to say? I'm not saying no one is sympathetic. No one cares. No one feels bad. But that percentage is pretty low. Pretty low after what we have witnessed in the life of O.J. Simpson. And that O.J. 30 for 30 documentary, wow. ESPN did a heck of a job with that. All right, we'll come back in here. Football, and more football in the 1 o'clock hour. Sponsored by Atlantic Windows and Doors right here on the Halftime Show on the Game. We've been talking about the Men's Clinic of South Carolina and Dr. Dan and the staff over there and what they can do for you if you have low testosterone. They can put you on a program specifically designed for you to get you back to feeling like you again. Because, look, you're getting older as a guy, and this testosterone thing, it isn't what it used to be, and it makes you not what you used to be. And you might be going through some stuff where you're not sleeping as good as you used to. You got brain fog. You maybe, I don't know, have a lack of drive in life, whether it's professional, sexual, personal, whatever. Maybe your workouts stink now. You're weaker. You recover awful from a workout. It might just be low testosterone. You call and set up a confidential consultation, 803-875-MENS. You go in. If it is low T, they will put you on a program to get you feeling like you again. The Men's Clinic of South Carolina. Call. Go talk to them. You have nothing to lose. 1 o'clock hour on the halftime show. Terry Ford, glad you could be here today as we roll this baby till 3 o'clock to the postgame show with Jay and Elijah here on the game in Columbia, Florence, and Myrtle Beach. Thanks for hanging around. Football in the 1 o'clock hour. We've been firing up some sound from Gamecock football players who spoke to the media yesterday. Let's get back to it, Ed Bird. Let's focus in on two guys who, one kind of got showcased at the end of the year, one we didn't see a whole lot of because of injuries. Let's start with Cut 16, Ed. David Spalding, who the coaching staff, I'm sure, hopes can stay healthy. Last year also hoped could stay healthy. The year before, hoped could stay healthy. David Spalding's biggest issue has been getting on the field with health. Cut 16, here's Spalding on what it takes to be a good corner.
So cornerback, I would say, for instance, press technique, you got to have good eyes, you have to have good feet, good awareness of the splits that you're getting. Because if you were like to a single leg side, there's different splits where they're lined up at. You got to know what type of leverage you want to be on, how aggressive you want to be, things like that. It's just more detail at corner because you're really on the island most of the time. So I would say detail and eyes, good eyes all the time. You have to have good eyes, good feet work, and good hands. So, yeah.
I mean, David Spalding covers it there. You have good feet, good vision, good hands, good technique. The hips are a big thing with in coverage, to be able to spin and turn and swivel and all that good stuff. So, David, it would be nice to have David Spalding on the field because, again, look, no one's saying that, Jalen Kilgore, DQ Smith, Nick Amenwari can't get better in coverage in 2024. It's just, it would be good to have a depth of coverage of guys who could possibly slide in there in that nickel and cover slot receivers. But that was an issue last year. Could it be a David Spalding if healthy? Could it be, Vakari Swain, for an example? Are there some young guys who might be able to be helpful when it comes to covering the slot? Just in case, maybe, for example, Jalen Kilgore, let's say he would struggle again this year. Is there someone you could pop into that position that could do a better job? Again, you hope everybody develops from last year, but it's always good to have a lot of options. So that's David Spalding. Bam Martin-Scott. Now, Bam Martin-Scott, you saw him on the field, maybe special teams, maybe occasionally he'd get on the field on defense. But then once South Carolina went to that 3-3-5, Bam Martin-Scott, the last 4 games of the season, popped. Got himself a couple sacks, some hurries, put pressures on the quarterback, was flying around the field making plays. You saw the athleticism, and we heard here a little while ago, Demetrius Knight, his teammate at linebacker, talking about Bam Martin-Scott running 22 miles an hour. So Bam Martin-Scott brings a lot of speed, quickness, and athleticism to the linebacker room. Also made a bunch of plays that last month of the year. We'll see how it translates into this year. But here's Bam Martin-Scott talking about carrying that momentum from the end of last season into this year. That would be cut 17 there, Ed Bird.
Yeah, I think that the last 4 games last year definitely transferred over to now, and it's definitely giving me a boost of confidence, because now, I feel like the world know, yeah, I'm a ball player now. So, yeah, I just keep on carrying on that same over.
But confidence is a beautiful thing. It is a lot of lives from the neck up, right? And now Bam Martin-Scott's got confidence. And where's that carrying this year in a crowded linebacker room? We'll see. We talked about it. You've got Debo Williams. You've got Bengali Kamara, Demetrius Knight. You have Bam Martin-Scott. You have the 2 freshmen in Johnson and Gregory. You got a lot of potential in that room this year and depth of potential. But Bam Martin-Scott, what he did in the last month, he was part of a defense that did a 180 in the last month compared to the first 2 months. So we'll see where that goes. But we've talked about this before. There's a lot of the discussion, we want to be multiple on defense. Run some 4-2-5, run some 3-3-5. And look, it's all well and good. And again, I'm no defensive coordinator and love me some Clayton White. He's a great dude. I'm almost like, just find what works for your players and just do that. Just do that. Don't get too cute. Don't get too multiple. Don't get too fancy. Just find what works. and just run with it. And if it's a 4-2-5 this year, great. If it's 3-3-5, great. Not to say you can't run the other one in situations, but again, think less, play more. Just like offensively a couple years ago with Marcus Satterfield. Think less, react and play. And I felt like that defense in November, there was a just react, go play. And you saw it was, I think, the second best defense in a lot of statistical categories in the SEC that final month. So, don't overthink the room. Don't try to get too fancy. Just go out there, look at your players. All right, what's the skill set of my guys? All right, let's run the defense that best fits that skill set. And just kind of leave it at that. And, so being multiple is great, but, there might be just one thing you could do really well, and just for the most part, you would just stick with that. All right, also, as we do football in the 1 o'clock hour here on the game, Rashid Rice. Now, this could, again, I'm bringing this up for a couple reasons. First of all, the story. Kansas City Chief wide receiver Rashid Rice faces 8 charges, including aggravated assault, after he and another speeding driver of a sports car caused a chain reaction crash. Police said arrest warrants have been issued for Rice for 1 count of aggravated assault, 1 count of collision involving serious bodily injury, and 6 counts of collision involving injury. Rice's attorney said last week Rice had been driving a Lamborghini Sport utility vehicle when the crash occurred. Arrest warrants on the same charge have been issued for another driver as well, who was speeding in a Corvette. I don't know where this is going to go. It might not go anywhere. It might go somewhere. I wasn't there at the scene. But Rashid Rice, how is this going to affect his availability for this upcoming season? The Chiefs, who a lot of folks already thought were in the market to draft a wide receiver to begin with, might now definitely want to draft a wide receiver in the bottom of the first round because they don't know what's going on with Rice. And look, the Chiefs are a smart team when it comes to drafting. All smart teams in the NFL, they don't draft for need, they draft value. Now, again, if 2 guys are the same value and one guy's in a need position and one guy's not, they'll take the dude at the need position. But you don't reach for need. You draft for value first. And you do look to fill needs, but you don't reach for guys. That gets you in trouble. The Raiders under John Gruden reached for guys. How'd that do? How'd that work? Exactly. So if Kansas City deems one of that group of wide receivers at the bottom of the first round valuable enough to take, it could end up being Xavier Legette. And I think Mel Kiper has Legette mocked to the Kansas City Chiefs at 32, which I'm with Xavier Legette. I'm going, yes, thank you, football gods. Because that would be huge for Xavier Legette's career to go catch passes from Patrick Mahomes and work with the offensive guru that is Andy Reid. All right, another little story from the NFL that just popped. Cleveland Browns running back Nick Chubb have agreed to terms on a rework contract that will ensure Chubb is back for the 2024 season. Now, according to sources, the Browns reduced Chubb's salary cap hit from $15.85 million to $6.275 million, and that the running back can earn over $12 million next year based on performance levels that he was achieving before his gruesome left knee injury last year. Chubb's had some knee injuries starting in college, but Nick Chubb has been one of the best running backs in the NFL, running it, catching it. Chubb's been phenomenal. But how does he come back from this last knee injury? So now you have Chubb at $627.5 million, which is going to save you on the cap. Obviously, it's roughly over $9 million less than he would have made as a cap hit. But he still can earn performance incentives to get him back up over $10 million. So an interesting contract that can work for both parties. That injury was bad. It just was bad. And Chubb, he's working into his late 20s. We'll see. But Nick Chubb does end up reworking his deal with the Cleveland Browns. Another quick NFL note. Detroit Lion quarterback Jared Goff would like the media that covers the Lions to realize that this is the start of a new era for the franchise and they can stop focusing on the failures of the past. Goff says, I have this, I probably need to drop it pretty soon because I'm hopefully going to be in Detroit for a long time. I have this thing with our local media where they almost relish in negativity at times. And maybe that's what gets clicks and what gets sells, but it's no longer what they need to live in. I see what Jared Goff's saying, and I understand it because you're sitting there going, look, I wasn't part of the past. I wasn't part of that team that won 0 games. I haven't been part of what is a laughingstock organization. We're now a playoff team that could possibly get to a Super Bowl if things go well for us. Let's stop talking about the past. I agree with that. But fans are the same way sometimes. You just, look, if things have been negative for you over and over and over and over and over again, even if you're trying to be positive, you're trying to, be Mr. Motivator, Anthony Robbins. If one thing kind of goes a little sideways, what do? You fall back on what you know. Oh, God, things are going to the crapper. Here we go. Here we go again. It's human nature. And I think the media in Detroit, they've been covering so many bad Lions teams. Your first thought is, oh, here we go. Going to go back to the suck. It's coming. And yeah, look, negativity does draw clicks. Negativity does draw eyeballs, ears. It just does. It's human nature. Again, there's this old saying in the TV and radio news business, it bleeds, it leads. If you're going to lead with, here are the good deeds done in the city today, and your competition starts with it bleeds, it leads, guess who's getting higher ratings? The Cub Scout helping the old lady across the street, not getting the ratings. It's the if it bleeds, it leads station. That's just who we are. For the most part. Not everybody, but a good, large percentage of us go straight to that. Love controversy, love drama, love dirt, scandal, rumors. So, Jared Goff's fighting the good fight, but you got to understand what you're fighting against. And Detroit, look, if you want to, Detroit is a media town, leans more toward the New Yorks and the Bostons and the Phillies and the Chicagos and the LAs to a point than they do to a happy-go-lucky media town. So I get Jared Goff, I do, but you're spitting in the wind, my friend. You just are. You're not wrong, but yeah, good luck with that. All right, we're doing football, the 1 o'clock hour, sponsored by Atlantic Windows and Doors. We'll come back, hear some more sound from the Gamecock football players. Jalen Kilgore, last year started as a freshman at safety, then slid to nickel. We'll hear from Jalen Kilgore and some of his thoughts about playing the nickel and also rotating in different safety spots. That's next. It is the halftime show. Terry Ford, Ed Bird's here. We go till 3 on the game. Halftime show. Terry Ford hanging out here with Ed Bird as we do football in the 1 o'clock hour. Sponsored by Atlantic Windows and Doors. We'll get back to hearing some sound from the Carolina Gamecock football players. We have been kind of sprinkling it in through the show. And we'll also, we didn't get our Firehouse Sub text of the hour last hour, so we'll get caught up this hour as well. We owe you two. 803-446-100 on the text line and the phone line. All right, Ed Bird, let's slip off to Jalen Kilgore. It's going to be cuts 14 and 15, Ed. Let's start off with cut 14. Kilgore discussing rotating different safety spots so far this spring.
I feel great about it because I feel like we all comfortable where we at. Like, we got Nick and DQ both playing the strong safety and free safety, me at nickel. So I feel like we both, all three of us, we can rotate it around anytime we want to. So game plan come around, we want Nick to come down at nickel or me go to safety. Like, we can all rotate those three different positions. So that's why I feel like that make us that stronger three in college football, if you ask me, because I feel like there's no other three safety group that can rotate like we can and know those positions like we do and run it how we run it.
So, yes, you have the experience of what those guys did last year. Remember, Nick and DQ are juniors this year. Kilgore was put into that nickel spot, not to say out of desperation, but, you know, if you're Clayton White, you were like, okay, try DQ Smith there. There were struggles in coverage. Tried Nick Amon-Mori there. There was struggles in coverage. We'll try Jalen Kilgore there. And, you know, Kilgore also did have his struggles. Hopefully Kilgore can get better at pass coverage this upcoming season. Then it's problem solved, right? But also, if you're Clayton White, how much of what you did last year in that last month where you started to, like, change up your coverage schemes, how much did that help, A, and B, how much of that can you translate into this year? Because it was better in November, especially dealing with slot receivers. So that's all part of this. But, you know, easiest thing is if Kilgore, you know, just improves in coverage. Again, a guy that coverage wasn't his thing coming out of high school, you know, didn't have a lot of experience as a safety. And hopefully the more experience Jalen Kilgore can get, he can apply to being better in coverage, especially on the slot. All right, here's Kilgore. Speaking of that slot, that's a cut 15. Here's Kilgore on learning the nickel position, Ed Bird.
So last year I really just came in, like during the spring, I was just learning free and strong. And so as the season went on, I started to learn some more nickel. And with game planning, I just had to break it down a little bit more on each team. But now I'm learning what I'm supposed to do just with our game plan instead of each and every team game plan. So it's way easier right now. And the difference between nickel and free safety, I'm just in coverage more. I'm not as in the fit, making tackles as much, but I'm still in there when I can be. But I'm mainly covering the slot receivers.
And remember, Kilgore was excellent in the run game last year. Coming down, you know, knocking the snot out of folks from a safety position, then she transitioned over to nickel. And this year, obviously, still at nickel, doing more stuff in pass coverage now than in the run game. And hopefully, again, Kilgore from year one to year two can make a big jump in handling that nickel spot in coverage on slot receivers. So that's the hope, right? Sure. Because if you got that taken care of, that's a big thing. Hopefully, also, what will help you in coverage is a better pass rush. Whether it's sacking quarterbacks, hitting them, hurrying them, pressuring them, whatever, just disrupt the passing game. Knock it off rhythm, give quarterbacks less time to throw, inflict pain upon them. That helps coverage. Again, it's tough to complete passes when you're laying on your back in pain. It just is. So that comes to, you know, whether it's Kennard, Stewart, Edmond, Thomas, DJU, whoever coming off the edge this year, hopefully there's more consistent heat put on opposing quarterbacks, which would also help the dudes in the back end in coverage. All right, let's get what we got left here, Ed Bird. We got one more. Let's slip back to the offensive side of the ball. We were talking about Oscar Attaway and the reps that he's been getting since there's no Rocket Sanders. Jawarn Howe, what we kind of look at is in the mix for that number 3 running back spot coming from South Carolina State. Here's what Howell said that Coach Pugh from South Carolina State gave Jawarn, the advice he gave him coming to South Carolina. That's cut 18, Ed.
Yeah, he definitely he just kind of gave me just keep going, work hard. It's going to be harder, you know, and just keep grinding and, you know, you'll find your way and find a path. But coming from there, This is everything I expected, you know, just to work hard and compete for a spot and just to learn and ultimately get to the next level.
I mean, Howell's numbers, we've talked about it. His South Carolina State numbers are sick. 8 yards a carry, 102 carries for 809 yards. Scored 7 touchdowns, busted off an 85-yard touchdown run, averaged 15 yards a catch on 10 grabs, a long there of 90 yards. Big play receiver was Jordan Howell last year at South Carolina State. So, again, how much run will Howell get this year? We'll see. I mean, obviously, part of it depends on Howell's development and adjusting to the speed and athleticism and just a different level of intensity in the SEC. And also, you know, the Rocket Sanders situation. If Rocket Sanders is healthy and ready to roll, you know, Howell might not get a ton of snaps. We'll just see where it goes. But Howell, obviously, it's a whole different ball game from playing at South Carolina State to playing in the SEC. But we'll see how Howell adjusts. We've seen guys from Division II step up to play in power leagues. So it happens. We'll just see, you know, how Juwan Howell adjusts to life in a Power 5 league, the SEC. All right, tomorrow, our buddy, Tyler Head, will be hanging out at TEC Equipment Rental, 2025 Old Dunbar Road in Casey doing this show from noon to 3. I will not be available tomorrow. Can't talk about it. Court documents are sealed. But Tyler will be at TEC Equipment Rental. A lot of cool stuff going on there. There's food vendors. It's just going to be a good time over at TEC Equipment Rentals. They're celebrating the grand opening, 2025 Old Dunbar Road in Casey. Pop on over. I mean, look, if you need forklifts or I was over, they got these big old cranes and big equipment stuff. I'll be honest with you, Ed, I was thinking, you know, the younger version of me, maybe after a couple, be fun to be up there in one of those big old cranes. That's why I'm older and smarter now. Yeah. The younger version of me was I 17? I think I've told the story on the air. We used to drive by this big billboard every Christmas, a Johnny Walker billboard, right? And had a bow on it, big plastic bow on it. It's up on the billboard, God knows how many feet in the air. Yeah. Corner of Route 40 and Russellville Boulevard in Baltimore. And we always used to say, we're going to climb up here and get that bow. Climb up here and get that bow. And I was like 18 at the time. Drinking age was 18 in Baltimore. And I decided that was the night. So a buddy of mine got up there. I don't know how high we were in the air. All I can remember is I'm swinging back and forth on a plastic bow, God knows how high in the air. Woke up the next day, stepped out of bed, next afternoon, and went, what the? I looked down, big old piece of plastic bow laying in my bedroom. I was like, well, guess I got some bow. We drove by later, 3/4 of the bow was gone. So, yeah, the younger version of me, Ed Bird, would love to be in a crane, high in the air. This version of me now, no, I'm good. But it'll be a good time, seriously. TEC Equipment Rental, 2020-25 Old Dunbar Road in Casey. It's a big celebration, grand opening. Tyler will be out there doing the halftime show from noon to 3. Again, a lot of vendors, a lot of cool stuff will be happening. Stop by, say hey. That is tomorrow, noon to 3. We'll jump back in here, continue football, and more football. Here on the halftime show, we'll spin over. There are a bunch of questions as spring football goes in college football. We're going to look at some of the questions in the offseason in college football next here on the halftime show. Terry Ford, Ed Bird's here steering the ship or stirring the ship or whatever you're doing. We're here till 3 on the game. What we're talking about here on the halftime show is football, sponsored by Atlantic Windows and Doors. We're going to get some questions going into the spring around the world of college football. We'll focus on the SEC to start off with. But before that, Firehouse Sub text of last hour. Oscar, attaboy, attaway. It's got a ring to it. And then to go back to the same text with a question, how many commits do we have in 2025? It's only 2 or 3 so far. Why is it so low? Well, there have been a couple here, obviously, in the last couple days. DeMarcus Leach, also Brian Rowe, Leach, a DB, 3-star prospect. If you hear the some of the coach, Abbeville, I believe, a very, very small area coming from, was Leach, but 8 picks last year. And coaches in that area say he's one of the best players to come out of that area and ever, maybe. Kind of a little under-the-radar guy. He's the kind of guy you get him, and then all of a sudden he pops on the collegiate level, and then everybody's going, whoa, why didn't we recruit that dude? Well, what was the reason for that not getting that guy? So Leach is a very interesting prospect. Also, Brian Rowe, 4-star wide receiver, 15 touchdown catches his junior year, over 1,000 yards receiving. He's a guy that's, the word is, if you read Gamecock Central's breakdown, very raw receiver, but moves easy in and out of cuts. So the hope is there. He's a guy that will only get better and get better in route running because he does seem to move smooth. It's not rough. It's not choppy. But he is developing. He's got a senior year to develop, and then obviously he'll get to college. He'll probably have maybe 1 year to redshirt and develop. Like for Rowe, schools like Pitt, Michigan State, Miami, Duke, Maryland, West Virginia were chasing him. Leach had Virginia Tech, Georgia Tech, Cincinnati, Wake, and Vandy. So both had love from the power schools. But yeah, it's been slow so far. And to try to answer the texter's questions, just hearing what the guys who know a lot more than me do, like from Gamecock Central or Big Spur, it's like it could be a multitude of reasons. A couple years ago, it started slow, and it picked up and it ended up pretty well. I know coming off of last year's momentum, having such a good recruiting class, you're sitting around going, well, what's going on this year? Remember, 2 years ago, it ramped up. It started a little bit, picked up momentum, and you got a guy like Nick Harbor. Last year, a lot of 4-stars. You had a 5-star in Dylan Stewart, a 5-star in Josiah Thompson. So far, like we said, it's been a little slow, but a long way to go till it's over with. Long way to go. And South Carolina is on the radar of a multitude of players. And one thing it could be just simply you've had a lot of change in the coaching staff. And a lot of recruiting is relationships. See, Mike Furry, the wide receiver coach, is all over the place trying to recruit wide receivers right now. And it is one of those things where these relationships, you build them, and if you start having changes in your coaching staff, it could affect, at least temporarily in the short term, recruiting. Now, is that the only reason? No. But could it be part of the reason it's been so slow? Yeah, it could be. It could be. But we'll see where it goes. Right now, a couple of recruits verbalizing here in the last couple of days to South Carolina. All right, now, and this ESPN post is interesting. 25 questions for 25 programs in college football. We'll dig first into the SEC and see what we have more time for. If not today, maybe next week. Georgia Bulldogs, the question, will the Bulldogs be able to replace their departing defensive stars? The first answer is sure. They always do. They just reload, man. It's like, okay, how many 5-stars left? Oh, we got 10 5-stars to replace them. Georgia just reloads. They're losing safeties, and they're losing 3 stars in defensive backfield, Javon Bullard, Tyke Smith, and also Kamari Lassiter. They'll just reload. That's what they do. That's Georgia. So my first thought is, sure, Georgia will replace their departing starters because the Georgia defense, they just next man up. Texas is in the SEC. What will the passing game look like? Losing some wide receivers. Donnie Mitchell, Xavier Worthy is gone. Jordan Whittingham, the tight end, Jatavion Sanders, all rolling off to the NFL. You got some guys coming in from the portal. Silas Bolden from Oregon State, which I think is a really under-the-radar get. Isaiah Bond from Bama. So you're bringing in more talent. Quinn Ewers, more consistent last year. You know, cut down on some of the issues he had the year before, was a much better player. Ewers is back. There were people that thought Ewers might roll off to the NFL, but, you know, Ewers and his people didn't like what they heard. So Quinn Ewers coming back to try to build the resume. And we'll see how he is throwing to a new crew of receivers. So to me, that's still a question mark. I mean, Steve Sarkisian is just an excellent offensive mind. So I'm figuring the Texas offense is going to be good. But last year, there was some explosiveness with Ewers and the receivers. So we'll see if they can repeat that. Another question, this one goes to Ole Miss. Will all of the team's transfer portal additions be able to transition easily? All of them? No. Never. It's never all of them, right? They don't all do it. But will Lane Kiffin get these transfers to be able to transition? A good amount of them, yes. Will Ole Miss be really good? I think Ole Miss is a playoff team. But not all the transfers will, you know, step up and be, wow, what a great get. No, some guys will struggle. They won't fit. It won't work out like everybody hopes. So for the most part, I feel like Ole Miss, they'll be fine because Lane Kiffin has shown he can do it. Now, is there a guarantee? No. And remember, I'll go to basketball real quick. Eric Musselman at Arkansas seemed like he had a golden touch, whether it's recruiting high school players, transfer portal. It seems like Musselman could take anybody in from anywhere. He'd go down to the local penitentiary. I'll get you in our culture. Don't worry about it. Until last year. And everything cratered, and it all went sideways. Musselman, he couldn't get him in sync. Couldn't get him to grind on defense, a staple of Eric Musselman basketball teams. And Arkansas was one of the biggest disappointments in the country. So it's never a guarantee. When you're constantly bringing in people from all over the place and trying to mesh them in a team-like atmosphere, it's not going to work every time. So that's the wild card out there for Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin. It's worked the last couple years for Lane, but it's not guaranteed to always work. I think Ole Miss will indoctrinate enough of these transfers, especially on the defensive side of the ball, to go with that offensive firepower. I think Ole Miss could be a playoff team. That's my thought right now. We'll see what my thought is in August. But I think Ole Miss will be fine, but there is no guarantee. Like I said, whenever you're bringing a bunch of different people from a bunch of different places, sometimes it doesn't work. We'll see. All right, Missouri, there's a question. Will the Tigers be able to have another strong defensive season? They lost their defensive coordinator. Corey Batoon is a new DC. A lot of new faces popping up into starting roles. Missouri last year really explosive on offense. A lot of that firepower comes back. But defensively, Missouri not as good last year as they were the year before. So I guess that's a legit question mark. You have a new defensive coordinator, a lot of new faces. That one is legit. That's the first one where I go, oh, yeah, And then Alabama, can Caleb DeBoer deal with the pressure of his new job? He's got no choice. There hadn't been a head coach in college football with this much pressure I can think of in my lifetime. And, yeah, Bear Bryant was replaced and other legends since I've been alive. But let's be real. In my mind, Nick Saban's the greatest college football coach ever. Caleb DeBoer, good luck, my man. DeBoer might be really good, and really good's not good enough. It just isn't. Caleb DeBoer can win 10 games a year for 5 years. If he only wins one national championship, people are going to go, that's all you got? Really? Do better, Caleb. Do better. LSU, will they be able to fix their defense? They better. LSU was a defense away from competing for a national championship last year. Changing defensive coordinator, changing position coaches, all sorts of stuff. Matt House 2 years ago was up for the Burroughs Award and then was unemployed. Brian Kelly flipped the defensive staff upside down, which, I mean, I get it. That defense stunk. Stunk is a compliment. So you brought in players from the portal. You've added freshmen. You've changed your coaching staff. We'll see. Because that defense was terrible. And it cost LSU a legit shot at the SEC and the college football playoff. Oklahoma in the SEC this year. Jackson Arnold, is that quarterback ready? A number 3 overall prospect in 2023 coming out of high school, number 1 rated quarterback by ESPN. They're 300. It's Jackson Arnold's keys now. It's his gig. Here we go. We'll see. So Jackson Arnold taking over. New offensive coordinator, Seth Luttrell. Also, I think Joe John Finley. They're doing the offensive coordinator thing. We'll see where it goes, but that's a question mark at Oklahoma, no doubt. And Tennessee, with Nico at quarterback, everybody automatically thinks this thing is going to cook. With that offense and this quarterback's arm talent, I honestly, I think it will. I mean, Joe Milton just, besides playing the position, he had a rocket arm, but, Milton lacks some very important qualities like accuracy. Nico, everybody thinks he's got the goods. And in that offense, it might cook this year in Knoxville. Maybe the second half of the year more than the first half, but we'll see. Now, some of the questions floating around college football in the SEC as we're into spring practice. We'll come back. Another Firehouse subtext, the hour at 803-404-6100 is next. Terry Ford, Ed Bird's here. It's a halftime show in the game. All righty, time for our Firehouse Subtext the hour at 803-404-6100. And it's about Scott Drew. Now, we've been talking football in the 1 o'clock hour, sponsored by Atlantic Windows and Doors. But Scott Drew, if you haven't heard, has basically turned down the Kentucky gig or is not interested in their interest in Scott Drew. So Scott Drew's not interested in Kentucky's interest in Scott Drew. Text, quality of life, at that level of wealth, quality of life is more important than a few more $1 million, I would think. I don't disagree with that. You know, if you're Scott Drew, you've got everything you want in Waco. You got a top 15 program. You've won a national championship. You've been to 2 Elite Eights, I believe, and a couple of more Sweet 16s. I mean, you have years where, you know, again, you get bounced in the second round of the NCAA tournament. But they love you. You rebuilt that program that had historically cratered under Dave Bliss with that just sad, tragic, crazy story about one player killing another and the cover-up by Dave Bliss, the head coach at the time. I mean, that thing was, it doesn't get much more sideways than that. And Scott Drew turned into a top 15 program. So all that together and the love that you have from that community and that fan base where you can stay until you keel over on the sideline. Why would you leave for that pressure cooker in Lexington, Kentucky? And not all the fan base, I'm trying to be fair. But there's an amount of that fan base that's delusional. That thing you should win the national title every year, be in the Final Four every year. Now, Cal came close his first 6 years. He was, you know, in the Final Four for the first 6 seasons. And I believe made the Sweet 16 the other couple years, at least. But it's a delusional fan base. They've won one national championship in the last 25 years. So why do you want to go deal with all that? Now, should Kentucky be better than they've been under Cal since 2019? Absolutely. Kentucky should also always be in the mix for the SEC championship. Shouldn't very rarely get bounced out of the first round of the SEC or NCAA tournament. There should be a lot of Sweet 16s in Lexington. You know, winning SEC championships or at least playing for them. Yeah, Kentucky's a blue blood program, but there is a difference between expectation and delusion. And right now, again, Baylor has won a national championship 4 years ago. It's been since 2012 for Kentucky. Haven't been to the Final Four since, what, 16? 15, 16? There's a lot of expectation in Lexington, and some of it's a bit crazy. So if I'm Scott Drew, I'm going to stay where they love me. I'm going to get a contract extension, a couple more million a year, and, you know, I can suffer along on $7 million roughly a season in Waco. I agree with the texter. Your quality of life's better. Your day-to-day life is better. You don't have to put up with a bunch of wackadoodles who think you should be winning a national championship every year, being in the Final Four every year. You don't have to have people like start your car or, hey, can you taste my food for me? If I'm Scott Drew, I'm doing exactly what Scott Drew is doing and staying put in Baylor. We'll see where the Kentucky search goes next. We yapped about it last hour. Could it be Bruce Pearl? It's not going to be Billy Donovan. It's not going to be Nate Oates. It's not going to be Danny Hurley. Obviously, it's not going to be Scott Drew. You know, a guy like Bruce Pearl, who's on the secondary list, I think Bruce Pearl would take the job. And Bruce Pearl's a heck of a basketball coach. He's been to the Final Four at Auburn. Did well at Tennessee before, you know, things got in the way for Bruce Pearl. Things today, you don't do under the table anymore. You can just do them over the table because there are no rules anymore in the NCAA. Maybe Bruce Pearl's the guy. We'll see the next wave on the list. And again, Kentucky fans, not all of them, but there's a percentage of them who thinks everybody wants this gig. Or Kentucky basketball. No, they don't. Because they've got a really good job and they're successful where they're at, and they make enough money to feel happy and comfortable, and they don't have to go work a part-time job at the Kroger, and they don't need that level of intense expectation. You know, for all the great things that Kentucky as a basketball program and as a basketball coach job brings, there's also a part of it that people don't want to deal with. So Scott Drew said, nope, no thank you. And I would have said the same thing. Absolutely. So we'll see where that search. I'll sit here and maybe do a little internet digging during the break to see the latest rumors on where the Wildcats would go with their head coach. But right now, Scott Drew says, hey, I'm good. I'm just going to hang in Waco, stay at Baylor. Also, we'll get some Mark Kingston cuts in What's Trending at 2, sponsored by Traditions Fine Jewelry and Gamecock Traditions. We'll hear from Coach Kingston about the challenge of playing in Gainesville on the road. That's coming up. Terry Ford, Ed Bird, halftime show. One more hour here on the game. Halftime show, Terry Ford, Ed Bird handling the controls this afternoon. Tyler will be back tomorrow at TEC Equipment Rental, 2025 Old Dunbar Road in Casey, noon to 3. Tyler's going to handle the halftime show tomorrow. Our buddy Dimitri will be with him in the 1 o'clock hour. And whoever else is on the guest list. There'll be food trucks, big celebration at TEC Equipment Rental as they're doing their grand opening over on Old Dunbar Road in Casey. Again, 2025 Old Dunbar Road, TEC Equipment Rental, halftime show, noon to 3 here on The Game with Tyler. I'll be yapping with you again on Monday. Also, baseball, 6:15 tomorrow night. The Gamecocks and the Gators in Gainesville. Start of an interesting three-game series. Both teams are 6-6 on the year. Both have had their good moments and bad moments through the season. And we'll see where it goes. Florida right now in the midst of a 4-game losing streak. It started losing at Missouri last weekend. Lost 3 one-run games to the Tigers. 2-1 in 11, 4-3, and 11-10. So they lost a tight extra inning pitcher's duel, another low-scoring affair, and then a high-scoring tilt. So 3 one-run losses. Then the Gators headed to Tallahassee in midweek and got run-ruled by Florida State, the number 10 ranked team in the country. 19-4 was the final there. And besides that, it's been kind of a mixed bag for Florida. Win one, lose one, win a couple, lose a couple. You know, it's been interesting this season for the Florida Gators after playing for the College World Series Championship. Had some weather stuff early in the year. Got off to a 5-0 start. And then the wins and losses started kind of going back and forth. Lost to Stetson in the midweek. And like I said, now we're sitting on a 4-game losing streak as South Carolina rolls into Gainesville. Yeah, again, the Gamecocks, it's, got a nice win over North Carolina on Tuesday in the midweek. Won the last game, salvaging the final game of the 3-game series against Texas A&M. Had a bad loss in the midweek, obviously, to Georgia Southern. Lost 2 out of 3 to Alabama. But there was a 6-game win streak before all that. So it's, again, 2 teams who have had their inconsistencies, who have had their issues. South Carolina, it's been like Florida's pitching has been awful. An ERA of almost 6.5. South Carolina, you look at numbers, nothing is awful. There's things that are more below average, things that are average, above average. But there's nothing that's really cratered except this hitting with runners in scoring position. That's been a problem all season. We heard from Coach Kingston about that a little while ago. He said it's like a case by case, and it is. Each player has their own issue unto themselves. Some are too aggressive. Some aren't aggressive enough. We got a Firehouse Sub-text the hour about it that I'm going to get to in a little bit. That I think is very interesting that a texter fired up to us on our text on 803-404-6100. And like I said, we'll get to it this hour because I thought it was thought-provoking. So... But we get back to Mark Kingston, Ed Bird. We're gonna a couple more cuts. Here's Coach talking. Let's go cut 4, Ed. The challenge of playing on the road in Gainesville. Again, cut 4.
Well, obviously we played them 5 times last year, and the home team won all 5 games. And so it seems to be in this series since I've been here, the home team has a major advantage. So we need to find a way to overcome that. Again, I don't think you put pressure on your team. You don't make them press. You just say, we're going down there to play the best baseball we can. We're going to enjoy it. We're going to have a lot of fun. And then you let the chips fall where they may from there.
I mean, look, again, the road is very difficult in the SEC. And if you look at the numbers, and remember last year, South Carolina swept Florida here and then got swept, in the Super Regional in Gainesville. And the reason South Carolina obviously was on the road in the Super Regional was Gamecocks had a flurry of injuries, finally caught up with them, hit a little rough patch, and it cost them a chance to host the Supers. If you look at the SEC right now, on the road in the SEC, only 2 teams have a win. Well, 3 really, barely. 3 teams have winning records on the road. Kentucky, the story of the SEC this year. Some transfer portal additions helped fuel this thing, but Kentucky 11-1 in league play. Overall in the season, Kentucky is 27-5. They are 9-2 away through the season. 9-2 away from home. The rest of the teams in the SEC, you got Texas A&M 5-3 on the road, Arkansas 2-1 on the road, both very short samples, and A&M was below 500 on the road before they won 2 out of 3 over South Carolina. They were at 500-ish on the road, right around there. So that helped pump them up, winning 2 out of 3 last weekend here in Columbia. And that's it. Everybody else, South Carolina, 3-5 on the road. I mean, Tennessee is at 500 at 3-3. But there's a lot of struggling besides that. Mississippi State, Alabama, LSU, Ole Miss, Auburn, Missouri, Georgia, Florida, Vanderbilt, all are below 500 on the road. It's just tough, man. It's tough. So hopefully South Carolina can, get some love away from home, away from Founders, find a way to win 2 out of 3. Like I said, this stretch of 9 games, Tyler brought this up the other day. You have got Florida in Gainesville. You got Kentucky. You got Arkansas. Kentucky right now, record-wise, the best team in the SEC overall through the... Well, no, they're tied with Arkansas as the 2 best teams in the league. Because both Arkansas and Kentucky are 11-1. Arkansas's overall record is better than Kentucky's at 29-3 to 27-5. But you're looking at the 2 best teams in the conference. And also a trip to Florida in your next 9 games. Right now, South Carolina is rolling 5-5 in their last 10. And you're facing a team in Florida, 4-6 in their last 10. So 2 teams who have kind of been in the middle of the pack and have had their good moments and bad moments through the season. Let's get back to Coach Kingston here, Ed Bird. Let's grab... I think this will be an interesting one to play, and we can kind of comment on it. Was talking about Will Tippett, the shortstop, and his defense. That would be cut 6, Ed Bird.
Tippett's in the lineup right now because he plays elite defense, both in terms of consistency and range. He's a leader out there on defense. He's kind of a nice centerpiece, along with Cole Messina when they're both playing. He has 12 stolen bases, which is an elite number at this point in the season. So from a base running standpoint, from a defense standpoint, he's an elite player. The offense is not what he or what we want at this point. But it's not to the point where we think the negatives outweigh the positives in terms of his contribution to us winning games. So as long as we think he's doing more to help us win games, then we're going to continue to run him out there. And at some point, I think he'll start to swing the bat better. He works too hard not to. He's too athletic not to. Just hasn't happened yet, but it doesn't mean it won't happen in the future.
Basically, when you look at Will Tippett offensively, you're like, wow. It's a struggle. 143 batting average. That's with 91 at bats. 187 slugging, 325 on base. Tippett has walked 21 times, but struck out 42. 42 strikeouts and 91 at bats. Almost half of Will Tippett's plate appearances are ending in a strikeout. That screams overmatch at the plate right now. It just does. But, Mark says, look, guy plays high-level defense. He stole 12 bags in 13 attempts. We think what he brings defensively and what he brings on the bases outweighs the struggles at the plate. But when you have a guy that's scuffling that bad offensively, other dudes have to pick up the slack, like an Ethan Petrie or a Dylan Brewer or a Kennedy Jones, Cole Messina when he comes back healthy, Parker Nolan, Tyler Cossey when he's in the game, or Gavin Casas and Talmadge Lecroy, Blake Jackson, all these guys, because really you have an 8-man lineup right now. I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just being honest and objective. Right now, you're carding 8 guys offensively because of Will Tippett's his struggles at the plate. Then you flip around and talk about how good he is defensively and the fact when he does get on base, he can steal bags. So right now, Coach Kingston's saying, look, we're going to keep going this way for now. If you start to struggle more on offense, and then you might have to think, well, can I keep a 143 hitter in my lineup for his defense? I mean, that's a legit question that's going to it's not going to go away as long as Will Tippett struggles. It's just not. And right now in the SEC, offense is booming, just like last year. And right now, your team is very top heavy. Petrie and Brewer's been struggling. Kind of broke out of it a little bit. But it's been a tough time for Dylan Brewer after a fantastic start. Kennedy Jones has been really good. Cole Messina, get him back in the lineup because, Messina has hit for power and average and has gotten on base. Parker Nolan's gotten it going lately. Tyler Causey started well, has cooled off a bit. Gavin Costas started a little slow and now has gotten hot. So, you need consistency through your order, especially if you're going to have Will Tippett in the lineup basically for his defense. So, and right now, like we just heard Mark say, the defense, and when he does get on base, the base running, those positives right now are outweighing the negative of 443 batting average. All right, let's get Art Kingston. Another cut in here. Yeah, we'll get one more cut in here. Kingston talking about the last series at Florida when South Carolina lost in the Super Regionals with a chance to go to Omaha. Let's do cut 7 real quick, Ed Bird, about last year's series in Gainesville.
We lost the chance to go to Omaha. I mean, that's what sticks out. We went there as a very hot team, a team that had the ability to be one of the best 8 teams in the country. I think when all was said and done, we were one of the best 8 teams in the country. But we had to go on the road to the team that ended up finishing second in the country, and we lost the series. So that's what stands out. It was a team, we had an Omaha team, there's no question about it, but because of some injuries that led to some losses that led to having to go on the road for a super regional instead of hosting, we missed out on an opportunity to go to Omaha. That's what I'll take with me, but I'll also remember all the great things that we did that year, and it was the last time with Wimmer and McGillis and Mahoney and Sanders and Hall and all those guys. I remember that too, just being in the dugout, knowing that journey with that group of guys was over, and so you remember the good and the bad always.
Yeah, I mean, you were close. You were close, man, to getting to Omaha. And you fell short. You couldn't host it like we talked about earlier. You got some injuries. You had a few losses in there, and it hurt you, and ended up going on the road in the Supers. And, then you said goodbye to a group that, did a lot of good last year for South Carolina baseball. So I get where Mark's going. And this year so far, would you like to be a work in progress at this point? No. Are you kind of a work in progress at this point? Yes. You'd love to settle down your rotation. You'd love to get more consistency at the bottom part of your batting order. But right now, you're still searching for some stuff. And you're still 6-6 in the league. And you have a top 20 RPI. So we'll get more Coach Kingston in the next segment, as well as some of the other headlines of the day in case you missed it. Kentucky still looking for a basketball coach. Is polarizing a nice way to say it, Ed Bird, figure in the world of sports and pop culture and courtrooms passed away. We got some stuff to get to as we do what's trending at 2, sponsored by Traditions Fine Jewelry and Gamecock Traditions. And do not forget, the craft beer card is back out again. $79 for a $360 value, the craft beer card. Basically, you can spend $30 a brewery at 12 craft beer locations. That equals $360. But it's only for $79. Go to 1075thegame.com and click on Sweet Deals for more info. Let's get back in here, continue to do what's trending at 2 on the halftime show. Terry Ford, Ed Bird here on the game. What's trending at 2 as we hang out here on the halftime show? Terry Ford, Ed Bird, sponsored by Traditions Fine Jewelry and Gamecock Traditions. All right, some of the other stuff in the world of sports trending at 2 right now. The former interpreter for Dodgers star Shohei Ohtani, who allegedly stole more than $16 million over 2 years from Ohtani to pay off gambling debts to an illegal sports book. Let's see. That's what the affidavit said, I should say. Basically, it's saying that the interpreter stole more than $16 million over 2 years to pay off gambling debts to a bookie, basically. That's what the affidavit filed by the feds said on Thursday. Federal authorities filed the complaint accusing the interpreter of bank fraud. Bank fraud can carry a maximum fine of up to $1 million and or up to 30 years in prison, according to sentencing guidelines. Ohtani, referred to in the complaint as only a, quote, professional baseball player, told authorities he did not authorize the transfers. To go further in the story, text messages showed that the interpreter began gambling September 2021 and began losing substantial sums of money later that year. Bank records also show that the phone number and email address on the account were changed to those associated with the interpreter. Investigators also relied on recorded phone calls from the bank in which the interpreter falsely identified himself as Ohtani to trick and deceive bank employees into authorizing the transfers. The complaint outlined one specific transfer in June of 2023 of $500,000 to an associate of a bookmaker. While the bookmaker is not named in the complaint, his role and detail match that of a guy named Matthew Boyer. Now, again, the whole story, remember, it started off with Ohtani saying he loaned the money to his interpreter to help his interpreter pay the debt, which, again, we're getting into some illegal stuff there. Then it changed to the interpreter stole the money from Ohtani, and Ohtani knew nothing about it. In the first pair of interviews with ESPN, the interpreter said he had amassed huge gambling debts and that Ohtani helped him out by wiring money in $500,000 increments. But then the interpreter hours later changed the account and said Ohtani had no knowledge. Now, did Ohtani know? And did Ohtani say, yeah, man, I'll pay it off for you because you're my bud? I could see that happening and the story changes because all of a sudden, like, whoa, we can't do that. If Ohtani said, okay, now he's getting involved in this mess. We can't have Shohei Ohtani involved in this mess. We're paying him too much money to play baseball. So could I see the change of story because of that? Sure, absolutely. I could see the change of story because, Ohtani maybe did his guy a solid, but that would drag him into a federal investigation. So all of a sudden you want to change the story because if you don't have Ohtani involved, that's good for the Dodgers, Ohtani, and the game of baseball. So the interpreter also said that he never bet on baseball. And attorneys for Ohtani alleged that he had been a victim of a massive theft. What's true? We don't know. But my feeling is the interpreter obviously will end up being the guy that would pay any price that could be paid, whether it's jail time, anything like, I don't think he's going to be put in prison like in the show Oz. I don't think that's happening. Could he go to one of those cool white-collar, prisons where you can play golf all day and pickleball and chill out and all? Yeah, I could see that. You get like a sentence of that, fall on the sword, so to speak. There might be a nice suitcase waiting for you somewhere under a porch, a big thank you. Could happen. Or maybe it's legit and it's true and the interpreter did all this without Ohtani's knowledge. Could be. But so the affidavit is out from the feds. All right, Jordan Montgomery, former Gamecock, who had a fabulous year last season for the Texas Rangers, signed with the Arizona Diamondbacks in late March, soft free agent market for veteran starting pitchers. Montgomery has fired his agent, Scott Boras, and is signed with the Wasserman Group. Montgomery was one of the Scott Boras four, if you remember this offseason. It was Montgomery, Matt Chapman, Cody Bellinger, Blake Snell, waited late into the offseason to sign. All four wound up signing deals below their pre-free agent projections. Montgomery finalized a $25 million one-year deal with the Diamondbacks, including a 2025 player option for $20 million, which could vest at 10 starts and escalate to $25 million. Montgomery won't come back for that. This was a 1 year, let me put up some numbers and go get a better deal next offseason kind of contract. Last year, once Montgomery went to Texas, was excellent, 2.79 ERA, a whip of 1.09. Was just really good for the Rangers as they won the World Series. Also was better than average in St. Louis. First part of 2023. So Jordan Montgomery had a good season. Didn't get paid. And, you know, part of it is with Scott Boras. So Scott Boras gets a lot of guys' money. But Scott Boras is a certain way he handles negotiations. He's very hardcore. He wants his guys hit the free agency market. And Boras is a difficult negotiator when it comes to dealing with teams. But Boras has done a lot of guys really well in their bank account. But sometimes the Boras magic doesn't work for dudes. And those four guys got below market deals. Now, is it all because of Scott Boras? No. You know, Jordan Montgomery's 31 years old. There could have been a deal with that. I mean, the older you get now, the less you get paid in market value these days. Matt Chapman also is a guy around 30. Cody Bellinger had his first good year since his MVP year. Cody Bellinger was terrible for a couple seasons before his bounce back 2023 in Chicago. Blake Snell won a Cy Young Award, but Blake Snell's a guy doesn't throw deep into games. So there's stuff with all four of these guys where if I was a team, I'd go, I'm not overpaying. But how did Scott Boras handle those situations? Maybe Jordan Montgomery thinks Scott Boras didn't handle it the way he should have, and maybe Jordan Montgomery wants to go with a crew who has a different negotiating style and maybe has a better reputation that could help him get the multi-year deal that he thought he should have gotten and projections said he should have gotten. So anyway, Jordan Montgomery getting rid of Scott Boras as his agent. In case you missed it, Scott Drew turning down Kentucky. The Baylor head coach is going to stay put in Waco. Drew has a really good relationship with Kentucky AD Mitch Barnhart, but Drew decided he was just going to stay at Kentucky. To the surprise, not of myself at all. I just am not surprised. Drew did have conversations with Kentucky for the last 24 hours, also conversations with Baylor. I really do believe that there'll be a contract extension coming. There was one in the works because Louisville reached out to Scott Drew earlier in the offseason. I think Scott Drew is going to get a nice bump in pay to stay at Baylor. All right, so far, the people that aren't going to Kentucky, that the Wildcats that were on the list, was Jay Wright at Villanova, former Villanova head coach, obviously Danny Hurley, Billy Donovan, Nate Oates, all those folks. That's not happening. Now, who's left on this list? Bruce Pearl's name at Auburn. We talked about him earlier. Illinois' Brad Underwood. Xavier, Sean Miller. We brought up Sean Miller the other day. I think Sean Miller would jump at this gig. Never's made a Final Four, but a bunch of Elite Eights at Arizona. TJ Otzenberger at Iowa State. BYU, Mark Pope. Todd Golden at Florida after a good year. I think out of that crew we just talked about, I think it would be Bruce Pearl. I think Bruce Pearl would take it. And Bruce Pearl's been to a Final Four. He's been successful in multiple stops. I could see Bruce Pearl being the guy. Brad Underwood has not had the success Bruce Pearl has had. Sean Miller hasn't been to a Final Four, but like I said, he's had a lot of success when he was at Arizona. Really good season 2 years ago, his first year at Xavier. So I think Bruce Pearl and Sean Miller, if I were Kentucky, that's where I'd be looking. All right, that's what's trending at 2, sponsored by Traditions Fine Jewelry and Gamecock Traditions. We'll get back in here. Today is April 11th. It's the greatest day in the history of the world. That is next on the Halftime Show, right here on The Game. Oh, the halftime show sponsored by the Men's Clinic of South Carolina. Terry Ford, Ed Bird. Time to hit the greatest day in the history of the world, April 11th. Sponsored by 1-800-GOT-JUNK. All right, on this day, just a couple years ago, 2021, Hideki Matsuyama became the first Japanese male to win a golf major, beating Will Zalatoris by 1 stroke at the 85th Masters. This day in 2014, Steph Curry, 30 points, 12 assists, 10 boards. Golden State clinches the playoff berth. Steph goes for a triple-double. Lakers, 27 and 55. A franchise low. 54th loss on that day. Finished up 27 and 55. Dark times in 2014 for the Lakers. Phil Mickelson won his 3rd Masters on this day in 2010. And in 2008, Missouri's Jacob Pryde set a Big 12 record, hitting 4 home runs against Texas in a 31-12 rout. Senior went 5 for 5 back in 2008, driving in 9 runs. Also on this day, 1997, Mario Lemieux reaches the 50-goal mark for the 6th time in his career. Lemieux became the first player in NHL history to score his 50th goal of the season on a penalty shot. Interesting. Also, this day, greatest day in the history of the world. 1981, Larry Holmes beats Trevor Berbick in a 15-round unanimous decision to retain his world heavyweight title in Las Vegas. Obviously, Larry Holmes had a fabulous record as a heavyweight. No one ever talks about Larry Holmes being one of the greats. I mean, first of all, the competition wasn't fantastic at that time. That's nothing against Larry Holmes. But folks just looked at Larry Holmes' boxing style. If he was fighting in the glory days of heavyweight champions, like with Ali and Frazier and Foreman and Ken Norton, even though he did beat Ken Norton for the title in a 15-round fight, a lot of people think if Holmes was fighting in the golden era, he would not have ever been the heavyweight champion. But in 1981, Holmes did beat Trevor Berbick to retain his title. Also, greatest day in the history of the world, sponsored by 1-800-GOT-JUNK. Going way back. We like to go a little way back. 1966, Jack Nicklaus won his 3rd Masters. In an 18-hole playoff over Tommy Jacobs and Gabe Brewer. So a lot of Masters today. One other one would go not Masters related. 1963, Milwaukee Braves future Hall of Famer Warren Spahn won his 328th game, most by a lefty in Major League Baseball history. So that's the greatest day in the history of the world, brought to you by 1-800-GOT-JUNK. Of course, Carolina back at it tomorrow night, 3-game series, taking on the Florida Gators in Gainesville. We talked about it earlier. A lot of struggling on the road in the SEC this year. So many good teams. It's just tough to win in the opposing squad's barn. We heard from Mark Kingston, head coach, was on Carolina Calls last night, talking about a variety of things. Let's get one more from Coach Kingston there, Ed Bird, talking about leaders on this team. Now, Cole Messina, who's out right now in concussion protocol, it will be a day-to-day thing, and also Ethan Petrie, even though only a sophomore, have emerged as leaders on this team. Here's Mark Kingston talking about Petrie and Messina. Cut 8, Ed Bird. Hit me up with cut 8.
Done a good job. On the offensive side, you look at those two, and then Lee Croy, when we're going well, those guys are doing a really nice job of leading by example, but also being willing to step up and say what needs to be said. Pitching side, Eli Jones has really done a nice job there. So I think there's no question those guys are very much invested in their program, in their team, in success, wanting to win. So I'd say they've done a good job. There's always room for improvement. Leaders at 40 are better than when they were at 30 and 20 and et cetera. So I think one of my challenges is to continue to really help those guys come along and learn what really good leadership is.
Look, leadership all the time. Some guys are grizzled veterans. Some guys are younger. Leadership, you just can't make yourself a leader, right? You just can't. Tomorrow, I'm going to be a leader. It just doesn't work that way. And you can't stink and be a leader. It's another thing. You can't, be awful and walk in the clubhouse or the locker room. Today I'm going to lead. No, you stink. You're not really much of a leader. You don't play very well. It's very rare that a guy that doesn't play very well could be a leader. And if there is that situation, it's a guy that brings so many intangibles and so much respect, I guess, with work ethic and knowledge that you can get past the fact he's not very good on the field to appreciate what he does off the field. But again, it's very rare. I mean, Messina and Petrie put up offensive numbers. They just do. And, speaking of Messina, he has been out, obviously, in protocol. Dalton Reeves has stepped up in his spot. And Reeves right now, I mean, it's going pretty well for Dalton Reeves. 294 batting average, 647 slugging, 350 on base. It's only 17 at-bats, but still 2 home runs and 17 trips to the plate. Dalton Reeves has done a nice job filling in for Cole Messina. Here's cut 5, Ed Bird, about Dalton Reeves' playing time. This is Mark Kingston from last night at Carolina Calls.
I think he's under consideration. There's no question about it. He's done a really nice job. His defense has been much better than we could have ever dreamed. His development since he got here has been through the roof defensively. He was always been a very solid hitter over the years, but he's swinging the bat well now. The trick is for one guy to go in, that means somebody has to come out. So as I look at the guys, I think our hitters that you can generally say have an argument to be in the lineup. I think it's at 11 or 12 right now. And so on any given day, we can only put 9 in there. So I can tell you, as of maybe a month ago, he wasn't in that group of 11. Now he's in that group of 11.
And there's Mark Kingston talking about what Reeves has done at the plate. Obviously, he's not going to be the starting catcher. But if he continues to hit, where do you put his bat? You DH him, but you've been DHing some other guys. It's just like Mark just said, he's got a rotation of about 11, and now it's a 12 with Reeves. Because, Petrie's there every day, Brewer's there every day, Jones is now there every day, Messina, Parker Nolan, Talmadge LeCroy, and Will Tippett obviously is in the lineup for his defense. But now you're rotating guys around with Tyler Causey, Gavin Costas, Blake Jackson. And does Dalton Reeves end up in that rotation if he continues to hit? Very interesting question. But if you look at South Carolina, like we talked about, the Florida Gators pitching is the worst in the SEC. If you look at some numbers, South Carolina's 7th in the league in ERA. You'll see Eli Jones on Friday. For the most part, Jones has been good. He's been good. 3.89 ERA. His whip is, when you look at, hey, where's it at here? I lost it. Opponent batting average 263, which, the way the hitters are in the SEC these days, is not bad. Base runners is 41 hits in 39 innings, 10. His whip's pretty solid as well. So Eli Jones he's been above average for South Carolina. You just got to figure out the rest of the rotation. Dylan Eskew, there's been inconsistencies there. Obviously Eddie Copper with the injury is out of the picture right now. You've had no other starters really take the ball consistently. A bunch of other guys have gotten their chances and their moments. Matthew Becker, I think, will go into the rotation after that really nice job out of his last outing, moving Becker in there. And hopefully Becker can help solidify the rotation. So we'll see moving forward this weekend in Gainesville. Again, 6:15 pre, 6:30 first pitch tomorrow night right here on the game in Columbia and also Myrtle Beach. We'll come back in here. Firehouse Sub, text the hour at 803-404-6100. We'll wrap this puppy up, get you ready for the postgame show with Jay and Elijah. Halftime show, sponsored by the Men's Clinic of South Carolina with Ed Bird, Terry Ford on the game. All right, our Firehouse sub text the hour from 803-404-6100. Terry, the problem in a nutshell with the hitting for the Gamecock baseball team is they don't swing at strikes and they get behind in the count and they have to reach for something. Sometimes it works, but most of the time it does not. I can see that. I get where you're going. For me, though, I look at it like they work counts. They have good strike zone judgment. Maybe they need to be a little bit more aggressive earlier in the count and what they call hunt for their pitch. And when they get their pitch, then barrel it. And maybe they're being not aggressive enough. Mark Kingston talked about it, Carolina Calls last night. Some guys are too aggressive. Some guys aren't aggressive enough. It's a case by case with hitters. I do think some hitters, they're getting too deep in the count, and then they're having to chase maybe with 2 strikes. And it's all about that hunting your pitch with men on base. And when you get that pitch that you can do damage to, you got to do damage. I think that's been the biggest thing is either they're not hitting that pitch or they're not doing damage with it, or they're being not aggressive enough earlier in the count when they get the pitch that they can drive. They're not even swinging at it. So it's a multitude of things when you start to struggle. But I appreciate the text. I see where you're going. At 803-404-6100 Firehouse sub text line. And how much of it becomes a thing between your ears? You get a couple hits with runners on base, man. You're confident when you're walking up to the dish with dudes on second or whatever the case. You're feeling good, right? But if you've been scuffling and the scuffle becomes more of a scuffle, all of a sudden, it's from the neck up too. You're fighting your brain. And it's been obviously frustrating for the hitters, coaching staff, fans. This team gets a ton of guys on base and they really have trouble getting them in. No team in the SEC walks more than South Carolina. Gamecocks 235 walks on the season, 3 ahead of Texas A&M. Then the Gamecocks also strike out a ton. 2nd in the league behind Missouri in strikeouts. And we talked about, like, for an example, Will Tippett, almost half his plate appearances ended in a strikeout. I'm so old school on situational hitting. I think it's real. I think there has to be some adjustment made when, you have 2 strikes on you. I'm not saying you change everything you do, but there's got to be some situational hitting component to your at-bats where you look like a runner on third, less than 2 outs. I got 2 strikes now. I got to put the ball in play. And sometimes you got to foul off a tough pitch to live for the next pitch. It's just the way it goes. And all this is a situational hitting. And look, they're coaching it. It's not like they don't coach it, They are. It's just it's not working right now. And that's something that's really hurt this baseball team. And all the inconsistencies and ups and downs, unfortunately, one of the steady deals is just struggling with runners in scoring position or runners on base in general. We appreciate, again, Firehouse sub. Text the hour at 803-404-6100. Yeah, Ed Bird, we were going to talk to Jay, but he's obviously late. Is he here? You seen him?
I can.
Oh, hey, how you doing, dude?
Sorry.
Good to see you.
Honestly, I love the Masters so much.
Were you watching?
Yeah, I was home watching that, and I was like, I let out an bleep. I got to leave. And I was like, thank God I only live 2 miles away.
I was say you're right there. You could almost spit and hit your house.
If I had said this was the old building and I had done the same time frame, I'd be late for my show.
You'd have been doing the Fast and Furious on 2 wheels of the minivan.
But no, so I was like, I got to go.
Okay, to the shock of neither you or I, yes. Scott Drew said politely, no thank you.
Yeah, and I've seen some Kentucky people saying, man, how bad must it be for your family to let you turn down a dream job? See, I've seen some refrain of that. Now, obviously on Twitter.
Sure.
But that's the level from some. I'm not going to put a blanket over the Kentucky fan base, okay?
There's some logical folks.
But but to see several basically saying, Scott Drew's family went and told him they didn't like it, therefore he won't take it. Now, Does that mean he would or wouldn't have if he had gone, or like, well, you're a man, put your foot down and you tell the wife and kids what's going on? Or maybe, again, wait for it, after 22 years in Waco, Texas, maybe they really like their life in Waco, Texas.
Or how about this? That's your perception of a dream job,
right,
fan.
Right.
Maybe that's not the dream job of Scott. Scott, I think you know us about this too. Scott Drew and Mitch Barnhart are buds. Good relationship. You think Barnhart hits him up, maybe texts him, "Hey, Scotty, what's up? What's happening? Let me send you a little picture. We just put something on the patio. By the way, we have a job opening here.
Right.
Can I talk to you?" Maybe Scott Drew said, "I really like it here, Mitch." And maybe Mitch said, "Look, let me talk to you.
Yeah.
Let me have a conversation. Give me a chance to talk to you about our gig." And because Mitch and Scott Drew are friends, Scott Drew said, "You know what? We're buds.
I'll listen.
I'll do it. And by the way, I just redid my basement. Let me send you a picture."
Yeah.
I mean, so maybe it's something as simple as that.
Plus, he lives where Chip and Joe live. They can come redo his house.
Absolutely.
They're not going all the way to Lexington.
No. So
that'll be the next thing, right? It'll be Chip and Joe at Scott Drew's house. It'll be the whole series. It'll be the whole
Absolutely.
new.
Look, man.
Did you see that, by the way? Chip Gaines today was like putting things out. He was. Well, Tyler told us yesterday that he was going back and forth. But
screwing with the Kentucky people.
Today he put one out that was just like,
it's too good.
There you go.
Hey, look. At the end of the day, look, those Kentucky fans, they can sit back and go, "You ain't man enough to come here." No, you know what? I like my life where it's at. I really don't feel like spending my time in a pit of crazies.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of that.
No, it is.
I genuinely do.
We had a texter say this in the first hour. I'm making $5, $6, whatever, million a year.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm getting a bump to $7 at Baylor.
Yeah.
I'll take $3 million less, not to put up with having to hire a food taster.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Hey, Bobby, start my car for me.
Right.
We just lost 2 in a row.
I still say go get Bruce Pearl. Go get
I think it's
Bruce
Pearl. I think Pearl's the next guy on the list. We'll see. I think he'll take it. I'm with you.
Yeah.
All right, man. You and Elijah, post-game show next. Ed Burt, fine job, my friend. Halftime show. We'll talk to you on Monday.